The advice
Dr. Doreen.
The advice and opinions expressed by the host of Autism Live and her guests are meant solely as suggestion and should not be in any way construed as child-specific advice. The Center for Autism and Related Disorders advises working with a board-certified behavior analyst who has experience with autism before starting any intensive behavioral intervention. Any choices you make in determining your child's treatment are completely at your own discretion.
Good morning and welcome to Autism Live. I'm Shannon Penrod. We're coming to you live from the Warner Center in Woodland Hills, California, and I can see that my lens cleaning cloth is sitting on the table. Clean up, Shannon. In any case, as I was saying, we're coming to you live from the Warner Center in Woodland Hills, California. This is the home for Autism Live. It is also the home for the Center for Autism and Related Disorders. So, very proud to be with you this morning on this lovely Wednesday. We got a jam-packed show for you. You know that on Wednesdays, whenever we have the opportunity, we have Dr. Doreen Granpeesheh live in the studio with us answering your questions. Unfortunately, we do not have her this week. She has other places that she has to be in. Sometimes that is the case. In just a few minutes, we're going to show you a previously recorded Ask Dr. Doreen, and I think that you will enjoy that. The rest of the show, though, we will be live, and I will be with you live while you're watching Ask Dr. Doreen, so you can send questions in. The second hour, we have Nancy Alspod Jackson joining me for Let's Talk Autism with Shannon and Nancy. Fabulous guests on the show. We've got Chris Hall, who is an amazing entrepreneur who has started a company. And by the way, he identifies himself as an autistic entrepreneur. He's got an amazing company that's known as Computers for the Autistic Foundation. So I know you're going to want to hear more about that and what he's up to, and how we can have more individuals like him being entrepreneurs. And then we also, I mean, this is big doings, you guys. We have Dr. Mary Barbara, who is going to be with us. She is a mom, but she is also a BCBA. Got, major props, right? And her book, which just tore it up a couple of years ago, was The Verbal Behavior Approach, How to Teach Children with Autism and Related Disorders. It's sold more than 50,000 copies, and it's been translated into 10 languages. So she's going to be here with us, via Skype anyway, answering some questions that we have for her, and that's going to be very, very exciting. Plus, we have In the News and a bunch of other things to talk about. So that's what our show is today. Plus, I wanted to take just a minute at the start of the show to say that I am a little tired. I'm just going to cop to that. I'm a little tired because I just got back last night late from spending 2 days up in Sacramento visiting with parents and with staff at the Center for Autism and Related Disorders in the Sacramento and surrounding area. And, it's amazing. I was thinking about this morning. I was like, how can one person be so tired and so energized at the same time? Because for me, having an opportunity to get out of the studio here and to be places where I meet people like you, good people that are out there trying to help individuals who are on the autism spectrum, and good parents and other guardians and caregivers who are desperately trying to help the person that they care about on the spectrum to reach whatever goals that they feel are important to themselves, or, sometimes it's a goal that the family wants. Sometimes it's a goal that the person who is trying to reach it is like, that's not important to me. But it's important to the people around them. And once they get a taste of what it's like to have that goal, it becomes important to the person. So I just wanted to say thank you to everybody that we got an opportunity, because Cecilia Knight and I were both up together in Sacramento. And my goodness, I come back from those kinds of trips filled with so much hope and energy to see so many young people who have devoted their lives to helping people on the autism spectrum. Just takes my breath away, right? And to see so many families who are doing the hard work to be able to give their kiddos the opportunities that they deserve. And it's not easy. Can we all just admit that and not pretend that this is an easy thing to do, but it's such a worthwhile thing to do. I know that. I know that because I'm a parent of a young man who was diagnosed at 2.5, and people had told me not to have hope, and I just call foul on that. There's every reason to have hope. Wherever you're watching us in the world, I want you to know that there are kids getting better, there are young adults getting better every single day when we give them the proper opportunities, and we can do that now more than ever. Even if you don't have an ABA center in the town that you live, there are resources that we talk about here on the show to help you to get done what you need to get done to help that individual or to help yourself to make the progress that you so richly deserve. So I just wanted to say thank you to all the Sacramento families that sacrificed to come out and meet with us and tell us their stories. Man, I'm so proud to know you. And to all the staff members who just worked incredibly long hours to not only do their regular jobs, but to show up and talk to us about what they were doing and get additional training that we had for them. It was just a very exciting 2 days. It feels like it was 2 months, but it was 2 days, two long days, but so worth it. All right, my friends. So don't forget, we've got a big show for you. This first hour is pre-recorded, but then we're going to be back joining you live. I'll be hanging with you live as you watch this next hour. Thank you, Traven, because I didn't even bother telling people how that they could reach us. The whole 2 hours, we will still be here live and you can interact with us. Traven's showing you some of the different ways that you can connect. I do want to remind you that our homepage is autism-live.com, and we have a brand new website there. So please visit. You know, when we're live, it says live on the top, and you can click on that and it will open on your screen. On the bottom of the page, it says chat. Click on that and it opens up a box. You will find that whenever you are on the home page for more than 7 seconds, a box will pop up that will say, don't you want to subscribe? And all you have to do is fill that out and subscribe. And what you're subscribing to is that you will get our weekly postcard that tells you who's going to be on the show. We don't spam you. We just don't believe in that. Life is too short for that. But it'll hook you up with information that we think is important. The only other time that we send you information is if something has changed. Like if we're going to do a live feed that we didn't know we were going to do, or if we... Sometimes I'll call Dr. Grandin, Temple Grandin, and I'll say, Temple, I'd like to make an appointment to have you be on the show. And Temple is, she's scheduled to the max, but sometimes she'll say to me, Shannon, I can't do it then, but I can do it right now. Let's get it done right now. Let's do an interview right now. You got the questions for me? And so when that's possible, we like do something right then. Wouldn't you like to know when that's happening? That's why I sign up and subscribe. But if you don't want to subscribe, that's fine. Just click the little X. It goes away. It won't come back up until the next time you're there. And I apologize, but we want you guys to get the information. I do believe that once you subscribe from that device, that the box doesn't pop up anymore. If you don't find that to be true, let me know, please. All right. So it is time for us to visit Ask Dr. Doreen. Here it is.
Dr. Doreen Grand-Pichet is the
Dr. Doreen is an expert in autism.
Doreen Grand-Pichet.
Dr. Grand-Pichet.
Dr. Doreen Grand-Pichet.
Dr. Doreen Grand-Pichet is a visionary in the field of autism. Now you can ask her questions on Ask Dr. Doreen.
So our first question comes to us from our fabulous viewer, DJ Phillips.
DJ.
Who gave us permission to say his name, otherwise I don't. But DJ has been on our show, and he's a wonderful. And by the way, I sent the message up to you afterwards, but last week he was very concerned because I didn't say a happy birthday to you from him on the air. And DJ calls me on these things.
I love DJ. DJ, thank you. I did get your birthday wishes. Sarah, my assistant, actually told me. And so thank you so much, DJ. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. And I checked DJ to make sure that, and Sarah said, no, already delivered. So it was all good. But DJ wrote it in, asked if he could be first, and I like to. DJ does all kinds of things for us. He monitors. He keeps Kelby and I on our toes.
It's fabulous.
It is fabulous. Okay, so my question is: I believe in recovery. DJ writes, but since there is no cure for autism, how can there be recovery from autism?
Yeah,
it's a great question.
It's a very deep question. These are the types of things DJ throws at us. I love it. You know, for many years, there's been a lot of controversy about both the word recovery and the word cure. I being sort of English being my second language, I'm not very convinced there's a huge difference in the two. There is somewhat of a difference. It's a very kind of subtle difference, I suppose. But let me tell you how I think about it. The way that I look at it is that from the perspective of a diagnostician. So, you know, we all go through life and we all have different strengths and weaknesses. And if our behaviors, let's say, are differences, you know, like for instance, I might need 8 hours of sleep, you might need 5. I might have a reaction to certain types of people, you might, whatever, we're all different. But if our differences get to a point where they become, they make it difficult for us to go through life, like they become incapacitating. Let's say because of something that is you have a hard time at work. Because of something in your behavior, you can't establish relationships. Various things like that. If those things exist and they exist to a level that is damaging to the individual, in other words, it keeps the individual isolated, it makes the individual non-functional, non-adaptive, then those things are considered a disorder or a disability. So I always, as you know, Shannon, I use the example of alcoholism because it's just one of those interesting diagnoses. You know, and if you cannot diagnose someone on having alcohol dependence or alcohol abuse based on how much they drink. It has nothing to do with it. All you look at is really how they interact with the world during their drinking, you know. So for instance, someone can drink a whole bottle of scotch every night, but as long as they do really well with their family and as long as they do well at work, then they're not considered to have a problem. And so these are the things that are very important, because then the meaning of recovery also interacts with that. And what that means is that you would be classified as recovered from autism, let's say, if you did not meet the specific symptoms of autism to a level that made it difficult for you to function at work and home. So let me just describe that a little bit. Symptoms of autism are you have to have these 3 specific symptoms in the area of, let's say, social communication, and you have to have these specific symptoms in the area of repetitive, stereotypical behaviors. And unless those are met, let's say out of 5 symptoms, you only have 4, then you won't classify for a diagnosis of ASD. You must have the 5. Now, if you don't have the 5, let's say you still have some problems with social behavior, then your diagnosis would be something else. You know, it'd be social communication disorder, but it wouldn't be ASD. So in all reality, you could say, I've recovered from ASD, you know, because you don't have ASD, you don't qualify. ASD requires those symptoms. The same would be, for instance, if you had, let's say, a language disorder and you were diagnosed, you could say, I've recovered from that language disorder, even if you still had some problems with fluency, let's say, or if you had some difficulty expressing yourself. As long as you didn't meet the criteria, you've recovered. Now, when we define recovery for our kids with ASD, they might have smaller, kind of not so pervasive disorders still. They might have slight language disabilities. They might have slight social disorders. In fact, most of them, to some extent, in adulthood, might experience some issues with executive functioning or with working memory. They might not be able to function in multimodal situations very, very well, but they are not outside of the norm by any means. They're just like everyone else. You know, some of us do really well when there's 10 things going on. Others do really poorly when there's 10 things going on, and our kids who are recovered will fit in there somewhere.
Yeah.
So that's kind of now cure to me means a completely different thing. It means like, it's almost, cure doesn't really apply in my mind to mental disorders of any kind, because cure to me, it's almost like there was something and we took that thing away and now you're a different, like you no longer are burdened with that thing.
Right.
With recovery, I feel like you always have some aspect of it in you, but you've learned ways to overcome it. You've learned ways to function normally in the world, even though it might be harder for you to tolerate people or sounds or whatever it is. Does that make sense? It's a little different.
It totally does. I find myself the more I learn about this, I throw in the sentence, the part of the clause, disabling aspects. So I say they have recovered from the disabling aspects of autism. They still have autism. Their brain is still wired differently, but it's as though we went and we took all the hurdles that made it impossible for that individual to do what they want to. Not what we want them to do, but what they want.
Okay, and I'll take that a little step further, because they don't still have autism, because if they did, they would have all 5 symptoms. Now, don't forget, we made up the name autism.
Right.
We defined autism as not a state of being, but a state of being that is defined by these 5 symptoms. So if you don't have those, you cannot say I have ASD. Right?
Well, but I think there is a growing movement of people who want to have autism and ASD, which is the disorder. There are people who say there are parts of my autism that are not a disorder.
Right.
I think we need to find a whole new lexicon, whole new set of words because we shouldn't be saying autism, we should be saying autisms, and as people like you phenotype it, and I know that's something that you're working on, that we're going to start to have, different names for things. I did a blog a while back and said, why don't we throw it all out and start saying, well, my son has blue-green Davulo with a rising LO, right?
Yeah.
Right? Which will describe, because when I say my son is on the autism spectrum and Nancy says her son is on the autism spectrum, it sounds like the same thing, and it's not.
They're so different.
Yeah.
Now, I have so many thoughts about this. DJ, look what you got us started on.
Yes. See, we're excited, DJ.
Because, see, the thing for me is, Shannon, that I have already been through 5 DSMs. Okay, so when I started autism, the definition of autism was completely something else. At DSM-3, it required 16 symptoms. That's it. Then there was DSM-4, then there was DSM-4R, then there was DSM-5. It constantly changes, right?
Right.
So when a diagnosis, and these symptoms must be present for you to have, and now the name has even changed, right? It used to be autism, it became autistic disorder, now it became autism spectrum disorder, it's always something. And so when that happens, it basically when I give lectures, I always say what that means is we don't really know what we're talking about, right? Because you can't really take a disorder or something, right, a state of being, let's not even call it a disorder, let's just call it a state of being, and redefine it every few years, right? That means either the state of being is changing drastically or we're becoming much more aware of what it means to have that.
Right.
Which I think it's the latter. I think the spectrum is huge. And I think we still insist on putting all these individuals in one box.
Right.
And as long as we do that, it's going to still change definition, because the person with Asperger's, which it falls under ASD, and the person with severe autistic disorder are not the same. They're quite different. Now, but all of that aside, there's one reason, there's essentially, let's say, one reason which leads to a few other things that we actually do want to call it something.
Yeah.
That reason is help.
Right, funding.
If we don't call it something,
Yes.
it's not just funding. Funding is a result, right? Funding
Okay.
is like if you have ASD, you'll get funding now. Okay, so that's a great thing, and it requires that name. But the other side is, imagine if you got funding, but now we started and said, hey, what should we do with you? Maybe we should do magnetic therapy. Maybe we should do running. Maybe we should, it's the connection of the intervention with the thing. So it's kind of like, oh, history has shown that ABA works with individuals with these issues, with this specific being, sense of being, ABA works. You know what? If you didn't have that name of ASD or autism, you wouldn't get ABA. You might get something else.
Well,
And
I
so
appreciate
that's
that.
important. So the grouping people is the same as what I'm very passionate about is phenotyping. It's
Yeah.
the same reason. When you group people, for instance, we group all individuals who are blind
Right.
because they will learn Braille.
Right.
And that will allow them to communicate. Now, have they recovered or been cured? Well, they've been cured. They haven't been cured, obviously, but they've recovered from the disability of not being able to communicate and so on. We've taught them a way to communicate now.
Yes.
Okay. So autism, in a sense, is the same thing. It's not like we're changing the inner person.
Right.
We're giving them ways to integrate into society. That's it. If we didn't, and that's my answer, that's always my answer to people who say, but I don't want to change. Okay, then you can't integrate into this society. This society has some rules. Maybe someone who goes and lives in, let's say, the mountainous, villages of Nepal will not need to learn the same communication and attention and so on and so forth that is part of this society. But if you want to integrate with other people, there's a set of rules.
Yeah.
And we all have to adhere to those rules, not just you. I have to adhere to them too. When I go to a movie theater, I also can't scream.
Right.
I also can't get up and move around 10 times. I also have to be aware of all the people around me. I also have to tolerate lights like this. It might be harder for you, it probably is, but other things are harder for me. So to me, it's all one thing. It's a choice.
Exactly.
It's a choice, and because autism is a childhood disorder, parents get to choose.
Yes.
It's really that simple. Parents get to choose for their children whether they would like them to go through a few years of intensive intervention to learn ways to acclimate and adapt and be part of society or not.
And I think the word, I'm so glad you used the word, it's a choice, because I think it's important. It's a ridiculous example, but I remember my mother teaching us when we were kids. She said, I'm going to teach you how to clean a house.
Yes.
That doesn't mean you're going to grow up and keep a clean house.
That's right.
But you have the skills, so if you choose to do it, you will know what to do.
Exactly.
And when people talk about, well, maybe he wants to grow up, talking about my son, maybe he wants to grow up and he doesn't want to do that. That's fine. But I want for him, if he does that, for it to have been a choice, not what he was left with because of a disorder.
Because he wasn't given the opportunity.
Exactly.
That's absolutely the most important thing. And now autism, and I will be brave again and take it a step further, with the current prevalence rate, it becomes less and less of an individual choice, because with 1 in 65 individuals, or as we believe 1 in 55 individuals now, it also starts to become a financial burden on society.
Yes.
Because if you don't learn to communicate, if you don't learn enough things to actually hold down a job, if you don't learn how to be safe, if you don't learn how to not hurt others, then society will have to take care of you. And society will have to mold around you rather than you molding to society. So with these numbers, it becomes harder and harder for us to just say, sure, everyone who has ASD can pick and choose. Fact is, it's impossible for society to mold to as many different individuals as there are now.
Nancy and I have a study that we're going to talk about later in the show that is just recently out, talking about dollar amounts of how expensive it is to take care of an individual who is a child on the autism spectrum, and how expensive it is to take care of an adult. And the numbers are wildly different.
Yes.
So, and this is one of the things that is hard when we're talking to politicians, trying to get people on board. We've come a long way with getting
Yes.
ABA funded, but we have to sit down and explain. We had to do that in California with the governor. Look, we know this is expensive to treat kids, but so maybe you spend $200,000 over the next couple of years on ABA, quality ABA for this child, but you're going to save millions because it's $2.5 million to take care of this child if you don't.
Yeah, and I don't know which study you'll be reviewing, but there's also studies, Shannon, that talk about not just the cost of taking care of this individual if you don't, but it also, you have to realize, you have to also add the cost of the parents of that individual not being able to work because they're taking care of this individual. So that's also part of the added cost. It's an incredible, it just accumulates hugely over the cost of lifetime.
It's huge. It's huge. So we are going to be talking about that later. But DJ, you see what you started a firestorm. I hope
Good combo,
I hope you're
DJ.
happy. Yeah, very good. We're going to take a short break, and then we're going to come back and answer a question that came in on the Facebook. Actually came in on the Card Facebook site talking about romance and that kind of sexual attraction and all of that, and where to go as a resource for that for our individuals on the spectrum. So stick with us. More of Ask Dr. Doreen after these messages. Welcome back to Autism Live and to Ask Dr. Doreen. We're here with Dr. Doreen Granpeesheh. She is answering your questions in real time. We had a question that actually came in on the Card Facebook site, and they shared that with us so that we could answer it here. They wrote in and said, "Hey there, I'm wondering if you have any videos or knowledge in regards to young adults and romance/sexual attraction with autism/Asperger's syndrome. Whilst I've known about the condition for years and have done all of the above, I'm curious to find out more information and to see things that I may be doing wrong, right, or may never have thought about doing in regards to communication and emotion." And I was sharing with Dr. Granpeesheh during the break that this is a very real issue for our young adults and adults who are on the autism spectrum, that they want to connect with other people and to have happy romantic sexual encounters and relationships. And when it doesn't happen, it's so, I hear from them and it's so frustrating for them that my heart bleeds.
Right.
There are a lot of different resources, and we can talk about some of the places. One of the things that I always recommend is to go to, I can't think of Alex's site, weirdplanet.net.
Yes.
And Alex Plank, Wrong Planet, thank you. Wrong Planet.
Wrongplanet.com.
I couldn't come up with it. Wrongplanet.net. Forgive me, Alex. You can slap me later. Alex is a good friend of mine. Alex Plank created that site when he was 16 years old, and it is just for individuals who are on the spectrum to be able to connect with each other. Make sure that you go to .net, not .com. Wrongplanet.net. And he has some videos on there. I believe some of them are with Dr. Liz Lageson, where they talk about flirting, and she walks him through how to flirt, how much eye contact to make, to have it be right, and how much is creepy, because there's a small fine line, right?
Yes.
And I just find that they're done really well and with humor, but good content.
And that's great.
Yes.
I mean, and Liz is fantastic. She has a really good program also for social development for younger, like teenagers, essentially, and social interaction, which covers some of this stuff as well, her peers program. And Liz is an example of the type of person that could help you go through this. At CARD, we have a series of supervisors who are, I guess, trained or experienced to work with higher functioning individuals. It's sort of more of our executive functioning cognition type people, and we will work them through this. I recently have started using much more of our psychologists, our healthcare clinic. We have a healthcare clinic with licensed psychologists, and I find that here at CARD, Dr. Daniel Oakley is very experienced with teenagers and issues of suicide and anxiety, depression, also sexuality and so on. And a lot of that is what you get through cognitive behavior therapy. It's not ABA, it's talk therapy. It's basically taking you through and explaining you. It's more like cognitive, mental exercises and things you can do to help with, just self-confidence. A lot of, I think, it's funny because I read this thing you just read, and I think to myself, anyone could say this. Any teenager
Absolutely.
could say that while I've known about, how to deal with romance and sexual attraction, I'm curious, is there more information, see how I might be doing things wrong or right, or something I've never thought of. Any teenager, this is a new experience for all teens and early 20s, right? It's a different feeling, first of all. The chemistry and the attraction to others is a very new feeling. It's funny because I was having this conversation with my daughter early this morning. And it's a very new feeling, and you don't know kind of what to do with that feeling. And then it's a very naked or transparent sharing of emotions with someone else. And it's sort of like you might have a very direct way of sharing your emotions, and the other person might have a very defensive way of sharing their emotions, or protective, and be very overwhelmed. Even though they might feel the same, they might feel very overwhelmed if you express yourself, and they might be more liking or desiring of someone who's less sharing, or whatever it is. It's the very first time in life that our true unego protected emotions come into contact with someone else's. And so it's much, much more complicated than teaching someone these are some techniques to use. It's not about the techniques at all. If it's about one single thing, it's about reading other people's perceptions. It's about theory of mind. Relationships and establishing or doing anything, attraction, sexual, romance, having a relationship, having a bond, is by definition the ability to read someone else's thoughts and emotions accurately and to respond to them accurately. So, and that's how we define a good relationship. So relationships where one person acts selfishly without any view of the other person's feelings or perceptions, and then this person reacts selfishly, are relationships that don't work. So my only word of advice is, if you want to get better at the social game, practice the ability to see things from other people's perspectives. That's the single thing that will help you in all aspects of life, and it really has a lot to do with that. How do you read other people's desires, their preferences? How do you understand how they are processing the world? How are they, if you were in their shoes, what would they want you to say? If you were in their shoes, what would they want you to do? That's really what relationships are about, I think.
And it's hard.
It's very, very hard.
It's hard for everyone, and which is why a lot of marriages don't work out and a lot of people don't get married. I've always wanted to make a board game that's called the intimacy board game.
Yes.
And one of the rules is that when you're playing with another partner, no one can get more than 2 spaces away from the other person. You can't get more than two
That's
spaces
fantastic.
ahead, or you can't be 2 spaces behind.
That's
because
fantastic.
that's, as you were saying, like if you're not, if your way of sharing is this, and there you get more than 2 spaces behind, and then the whole thing falls apart, and you got to start over again.
That's beautiful. And it's funny that you use the word intimacy, because when we study it, the way that they tell you to remember this is into me you see. And that is theory of mind. Into me you see, and that's what allows intimacy.
Yes.
And that's exactly again, goes back to being able to see other people's perspectives. So focus on that. Don't focus on the overt thing, because if you see their perspective, you'll know the things they like, the things they dislike, the things they are afraid of, the things they feel safe with, the things that attract them, all of that.
And it really is, it's a minefield. One of the things I love, the stories I love to tell, there's a movie called The Story of Luke, which is about a young man with Asperger's whose grandmother dies and he needs to go live with other people in the family, and they have to kind of sort things out. And we had Lou Taylor Pucci, who plays Luke, on the show. He was so delightful. And we had the director on the show. There's a moment in the movie where Seth Green plays another person who's on the spectrum who pulls Luke into an office space and he says, watch this. And they're looking through the blinds as a guy walks up to the water cooler and hits on another girl in the office.
Right.
And Seth Green
That's awesome.
gives this,
I have to watch it.
You've got to watch it. Seth Green gives this detail. He's like, look, do you see the way she touches her hair and the way he looks down and she does this, that means this. And he goes through the whole thing and explains it all to Luke, who's like, how does anybody understand this,
all
right?
That. Right.
Well, Seth Green went on the Conan O'Brien show.
Right.
And they showed the clip, and Conan watched it, and he said, I needed this video when I was a teenager. I need this video now.
That's right.
Why has nobody ever explained this to me? I think every guy in this audience just had an aha moment. And I remember watching that and going, it's true.
Yes.
Nobody knows what they're doing.
And so when you talk about these things, right, that you just mentioned, what are we actually observing? We're observing cues that allow us to understand what is inside that person. It's being able to see things from that person's perspective. It's like, oh, if she did that, that means she just liked what I did. So maybe I should do more of that.
Right.
And you're right, Shannon, none of that exists. And we teach our kids, because we have them very young, we teach them how to read social cues that are appropriate to a young person.
Yeah.
We don't really get much into how to teach them to read social cues of this nature, and we should.
Yes,
we absolutely should. I just made a note of it.
Absolutely. Well, and I will say this, that we've had Evelyn Kung on the show before, and Evelyn has in her desk somewhere a bunch of cards that she has made for her older clients that have lists of things to look for and know and what to do, and they're like decision trees. And I have threatened her that if she doesn't make it into a book or an app or something, I'm going to stop speaking to her.
Right.
I've threatened her, Evelyn Kung, because they're brilliant, and everyone would want them, not just people on the spectrum. Things like, you know, if I broke up with somebody and they call me, what should I do?
Yes.
Wouldn't you want that app if you had teenagers?
Honestly.
Or if you were a teenager? Okay. Anyway, I've said enough. All right. We're going to take a short break, and then we got a bunch of questions to get to, so stick with us. Welcome back to Ask Dr. Doreen. We're here with Dr. Doreen Granpeesheh, and she is answering your questions in real time. One of the questions that we, first of all, we have to say that somebody wrote in and said, thank you for getting it.
That's nice.
ABA, diet, medical, legal, insurance, etc. Your show is so informative and brings so much courage. And then in a second, we'll talk about what her question was. But somebody wrote in and said, did you see Robert De Niro on the Today Show? He talked about vaccines and autism, worth watching. And then there's a question mark. And I was just saying to Dr. Granpeesheh, for those of you who missed it, Robert De Niro was on the Today Show last week. And then on Monday, they aired the Today Show aired another segment with Robert De Niro where they took Al Roker, Robert De Niro, and Janet, her last name
Jane something.
Jane, you're right.
Yes.
The other person who
the
was
co-founder of Tribeca.
Yes, exactly. Thank you. And I have some timers now. I can pull up some names and not other names. But they took them into a separate room. It's recorded, so there is ostensibly some editing. And Al Roker again asked some of the questions. And Robert De Niro said, I have questions. I have questions. She then voiced some of her concerns about the film, that she felt that at certain points they were saying one thing and at another point they were saying another thing, and she said there are inaccuracies in the film. He answered that and said there are inaccuracies in all documentaries. It's worth a discussion. She then said people should go and see the movie and see for themselves and judge for themselves. And they talked about the fact that had it been shown at Tribeca, it was a 125-seat theater. It would have been shown once, and that by refusing it, it's gotten a lot more publicity. That's
true.
But we should say that tomorrow on the show, Nancy and I had an opportunity last week to do an extended interview. It's an hour, you guys, with Del Bigtree, who is the main producer of the film, and with Polly Tomey, who is in the movie and one of the lesser producers of the film. We should also say that you are featured in the film as an expert talking about prevalence, about autism. And we do give a disclaimer tomorrow. There is a picture of my son working with you in the film. And of course, we're talking about Vaxxed. I don't think I said that before. Vaxxed. I think anybody who doesn't know that that's what we're talking about, you've been on another planet. because that's certainly been a firestorm in our public. Do you want to, because they wanted to know if you saw the Robert De Niro. Do you want to
I
say
saw the
that?
first Robert De Niro interview, and I was very proud, I guess, of Robert De Niro in the sense that, you know, I think one of the main things about this whole vaccine controversy thing is that nobody wants, it's almost like we're not allowed to talk about it. And I feel like we're in America, and we should have the, you know, we right now have the right to choose our own sexual preferences, gender, you name it. I mean, we can do anything now. It's like such an open, but we're not allowed to talk about this. And that kind of bothers me, because I feel like everybody should have the right to have an opinion about this. You know, one of the things that is astonishing to me is that whether or not this is an anti-vaccine or pro-vaccine or whatever film it is, the issue of vaccines and the fear that people are told, like, you know, hey, it's because of anti-vaccine type people that we had such an epidemic of measles in Disneyland. And the truth is about 600 people got measles. And that's nowhere close to the number of people who potentially believe that their child got autism due to the MMR vaccine. And so, you know, when you have this many people who had measles, and yes, measles is a serious disease, but it's not in the same realm as autism, to be quite honest. Autism can be lifelong. And so, you know, and there's thousands and thousands of people who feel themselves that there's something more to this. And we don't give disrespectful to not allow those people to voice their concerns and to say, hey, I really want this studied. And then to hear that the CDC potentially has information or studies that they're not sharing with the public is extremely concerning, because our entire world depends on what the CDC tells us. So those are the factors. It's not about so much, I think it's not anymore. I think this film, the statement that it makes that is so shocking, is more about sort of what is the information that is given to us and not given to us. And that's not just the CDC in general, it's a lot of stuff. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that goes on in the Middle East that we would never know. I listen sometimes to Al Jazeera, and it's fascinating when you hear things that would never, that are relayed to through the media here 2 days later in a completely different way.
Absolutely.
So we know that we are influenced by that information, obviously, and that information is restricted. That's what concerns me.
It concerns me too, and this is one of the things that we talked about last Thursday after the Robert De Niro interview. When did it become that we're not allowed to ask questions about anything?
Right. Right.
I just don't understand that.
Right.
And when did it become that if somebody does ask a question publicly that they're vilified?
Right.
And certainly that has been happening to Robert De Niro. And you know, to me, it doesn't matter where you may or may not stand on this. He should be allowed to ask questions.
Absolutely, but the other side of it, Shannon, is that it is sort of important where you, like, you know, let's say you truly believe. Let's say this is the kind of stuff that's difficult. So let's say you have a relative whose child from one day to the next changed.
Yes.
And I actually say this on the film. I have seen children who were, let's say, siblings of a child I was treating, and I've seen them change drastically within a week. Now, I've also seen parents who come in for intake, and they'll bring with them a DVD or a video of their child, and they will show me on the video, it says, the mother is saying, and I've seen more than, I'm talking 10, 20 times I've seen this, where the mother is saying something like, you know, and tomorrow we're going in for his MMR shots or something like that, you know, and so you know it's a timestamp, and you see the child interacting with other children, playing, playful, so on, and then the next video is like right after the MMR shot, and it's like the child is limp, uninvolved, completely a different child, and you see that. Okay.
Yes.
Now, has there been a study to support this? No, there hasn't been sufficient, or if there has been, it's been hidden. That's what VAX says. Now, but what's important is this. Imagine if you're the cousin of this family, right? And you see this happening and you're convinced that there is a connection, but you live in a state where you are mandated to give that very same shot to your child And if you don't, your child will miss out on school and all other possible things. That to me is not right, because then your opinion doesn't matter. And those are the types of things that I feel really terrified about, because I'll be honest, I grew up in the world of autism, right? I mean, I've been doing work with autism since I was, I don't know, 15, right? I mean, my whole life has been autism. And it was a pretty scary period of time going through I'd say, like, let's say late 90s, early 2000s, when a lot of this information was coming out, and it had not yet raised enough eyebrows to be blocked. And so for me, if I had not been given the choice of what vaccinations I want to give my children at what time, that would be very concerning to me. And of course, the thing about this film, is that it doesn't say don't vaccinate.
Exactly.
It says split them up and do them slightly later.
Right.
That's all it says.
Exactly.
And so it's kind of interesting that even that is such a, and because that is being fought against, it makes you wonder, like, wait a minute, why is that such a no-no? Is it just money then?
Well,
you know, that's what makes
and
you
certainly the questions are raised there. For me, I'm a very logical person, and when we had the measles outbreak here in Southern California, and it was such an environment of fear for months, it was such an environment of fear on all sides. One of the things that was so striking to me logically is that we had every night on the nightly news here locally, we had a doctor, a pediatrician, who would come on, and they would have a family, and there would be a small child, and they would say, you know, this is Roberto, and Roberto has leukemia, and Roberto's father would like to say something to you, and every night they would have something like this, and Roberto's father would come forward and say, with tears, and say, I can't vaccinate my child because his immune system is compromised because he has leukemia. So I'm begging you to please vaccinate your child. And I felt that for him, but I always thought, okay, but wait a second. We've already identified that there are some children, his child, the doctor said, can't have this vaccine because of his immune system. So why are we all assuming then that we know which children can have it and which children can't? And why are people legislating, well, I already know that your child can, if we know, nobody is denying that there are some children that immune system cannot handle it. How can we have a law that's one size fits all when clearly
that's a
that
very
is not
good point.
the case?
That's exactly right. And if the child didn't have leukemia, we would know whether or not his immune system can handle it.
And we know that some children's immune systems can't handle it.
And that's the point. And again, no one is saying don't vaccinate your children.
Right.
The point is it okay to vaccinate them after 3?
Yeah.
Is it okay to split those vaccines up and do it after 3? That is the question. The question is not should we vaccinate or not. No one is debating that question.
And the additional question is, if the CDC isn't sure about that, why aren't they doing more studies?
Exactly. And if they are, why aren't we hearing about it?
Right.
I mean, that's all it is. And I do think it's a good film. I think it's a strong film. I think people should probably go see it. I don't even know if you can see it right now. I know it was in LA all last week.
There are lots of cities that you can go. They're in New York this week. And we're going to be covering this extensively tomorrow with Del Bigtree and Polly Tomey. You're going to get to see. It's an hour-long interview. And the one thing that, we said gloves off. We're going to ask every question that there is. But the one thing that we said was we're not going to edit at all.
Right.
So that you will see it in its entirety. They got the opportunity to say everything that they wanted to say. We got to ask every question that we wanted to ask. And
I have to say another aspect of the movie that I thought was very important was, I think, and Shannon, I've done work with autism my whole life, right? And I brought one of my friends when I went to see the movie, and my daughter, and I was, all 3 of us were crying, and I said to my friend, and she said, how are you crying? You just do this for a living. And I said, it doesn't matter. It's like 35 years I'm doing this. I still get emotional when I hear these stories. And I think that it's one thing the movie did extremely well was it's really brought across the perspective of the parent. And it was just extremely touching, not just Polly's, but a bunch of other parents. And it was really a very good view into the parents' experience with autism. Now, whether they feel it's vaccine related or not, just the experience of hearing your child doing these things and so on was incredible.
Yeah. And I do think it's important that one of the things that Dell has said in many interviews, and you'll see tomorrow, there's a moment when Polly says something, and I ask her a follow-up question on it, and it's a very emotional, gloves off moment. Yeah. I thought Polly was going to come across the table and choke me, and I said, I have to ask this. You know, I mean, it's so don't think that it's all a happy interview. There's a couple of moments in it, but I do think it's time that we stop questioning when there's so many parents who say this would happen and I have evidence of it, and it maddens me sometimes when we see on the news that then they send in the pediatrician who says, well, upon reflection, those parents, you know, once we talk to them, they realize maybe there were symptoms before. I do think it's time that there is a system for reporting vaccine reactions.
Yes.
So why are we, when somebody says my child had a vaccine reaction, why are we like, oh, that couldn't have happened?
Right.
There's a whole system for reporting it, which means it exists.
Right.
So I don't know for them, and I think that no one can know for them.
And
we need to respect it.
Absolutely. And one final comment. I mean, it's just certain things were brought to light for me, which I haven't thought about in a long, long time. Another thing that is brought to light for me is the actual details of what vaccines, aside from autism. Let's put autism out for a second, the side effects of vaccines. Mm-hmm. And I think by right, we as parents should be told, when you have surgery, someone sits with you and says, these are all the side effects, read this and sign it. We don't do that with vaccines. And the possible side effects are pretty scary. The things like seizure activity and so on and so forth. And it's like, oh my God, Lord, you know?
Yeah. There is a bill right now in California Assembly that is being sponsored by a lawmaker, an assemblyman in Orange County, a Republican lawmaker, that is saying since we have this law in the books that is requiring people to vaccinate in order to go to school, then this bill would force them on their website to list all of the side effects and the vaccine reporting system, all the people who have reported and how to report if you have a vaccine reaction, and all the money that has been paid out in vaccine injury court.
Amazing.
So it's a proposed bill. We'll see if it passes. We have invited that assemblyman to be on the show and have not heard back. So, I was like, oh, well, isn't that interesting that, and everybody's like, doesn't that already exist? And there isn't transparency at this point in the state of California. It is required. There is a law saying you have to do it, but there is no transparency at all in a visible place. You'd have to dig and look and whatever. Unfortunately, we're out of time.
I know, I'm sorry.
And there are so many questions that I wanted to get to that are so good. But these were important things that we were talking about. And I do want to take just a second to thank you for everything that you do always.
Thank you very much.
And for being there for the families and being available for the families. There have been several times lately where we've referred somebody specifically to you, and you always find a way to help and support, even when it's hard. Even, I'm just thinking about the mom who was in the Philippines that I came to, and she's like, she's in the Philippines, she doesn't have the internet, she gets 1 hour to Facebook message a week, and she wants to help her son, and you said, okay, what do we have in our arsenal, and you sent her a book.
Yeah, I mean, we can also print out things and send it to the Philippines. Yes. That's another thing. But it's like, it's so
But you
hard.
sent her a book, and you always find a way. We so greatly appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Anne.
Do you provide care services to someone with autism? Recently, more and more children are being diagnosed with the condition and getting the support they need as awareness grows. But what happens to these children as they grow up? It's estimated that over 500,000 youth with autism will turn 18 in the next decade, and they'll be faced with a very difficult reality. As children with autism grow up, their services start to disappear or become very difficult to access. Things like medical care, mental health counseling, vocational training, and more. All services that are still desperately needed. The loss of support that youth with autism face as they grow up is so severe that it's referred to in the autism community as falling off a cliff. Adults with autism need the same level of support they had as children to avoid falling off the services cliff. Introducing Skills Living, the web-based software designed specifically to help transitioning youth and adults with autism so they can avoid the cliff and instead fly to success. With Skills Living, help your learner with autism develop the skills they need in all the critical areas of adult life, including self-control, planning, and problem-solving, effective communication, performing life skill tasks for independent living, acquiring and maintaining employment or other meaningful activities, developing and maintaining social skills and relationships, accessing transportation and public services, and being safe. Skills Living includes a comprehensive assessment, a data collection mobile app, behavior intervention plan builder, and automatic progress reporting. It also provides a complete curriculum addressing 16 key areas spanning the entire range of functioning adulthood. Skills Living is easy to use and can be implemented by schools, parents, and autism service providers. Call or click today for your free demo and see how Skills Living can help your learner with autism avoid the cliff and instead reach their fullest potential. Skills Living. Wish, learn, become.
Parent to parent, you might be asking yourself sometimes, why does my child have meltdowns? Well, the difference between tantrums and meltdowns, they're a part of typical development, but meltdowns are when things get a little bit more out of control, when even the child isn't sure what's entirely wrong. Generally with a meltdown, there's an environmental component. There's something else going on outside the child that's making the tantrum worse. It's really important that we start to be detectives and take notes and look around at the environment and start to figure out what are the things that happen every time your child has a meltdown. And lastly, it's important to get help. You really can't face these kinds of things effectively, completely on your own. Tantrums, they're a part of typical development, but don't accept meltdowns as something that just happens. Make sure you get help and support. You might be asking yourself if your child has autism.
Good morning and welcome to Let's Talk Autism with Shannon and Nancy. I'm Nancy Allspot Jackson.
And I'm Shannon Penrod, and thrilled to be here with my
Thrilled
good
to be
good
here.
friend.
Yeah.
We're going to be with you guys live for the next 2 hours. We've got 2 hours. We were just there for an hour. Now we're going to be here for an hour, and we've got a lot of amazing stuff, great guests and stuff to talk about.
2 great guests.
Yes, thrilled about all of that, and we should just say who we have. And I don't remember which order. I think we have
Chris Hall first.
Okay, so Chris Hall, he calls himself an autistic entrepreneur.
Mm-hmm.
How much do we love that? And his business is Computers for the Autistic Foundation.
Right.
Can't wait to hear about that and how he got started in that. And then we got an amazing guest that I've wanted to have on the show for a long time, Dr. Mary Barbara. She is a mom, but she's also a BCBA.
Mm-hmm.
Did you ever think about becoming a BCBA? Did anybody
No.
ever try to talk you into BCBA?
No.
I certainly had people
You could
saying
be
to
one.
me,
You know enough.
I could not be a BCBA, but people talk to me and still they're like, you should become a BCBA. And I was encouraged when they would say, some moms take their knowledge and they become
Mm-hmm.
a BCBA. And I was like, well, those women are better than I. I just put a period at the end of that sentence. I was like, no way.
Right.
So I'm always in awe of women that can do that. She has an amazing book that's The Verbal Behavior Approach, How to Teach Children with Autism and Related Disorders, and amazing book that sold over 50,000 copies. And so I'm excited that we're going to have her on the show at long last. And then we've got news to cover as well, so a little bit of news. So shall we start with, this is... I've heard a little bit about this, but it's, I must say, I'm amazed that we're still talking about this. But we've got an interesting report that says that some children who dramatically lose a range of abilities after the age of 2 may have a condition called childhood disintegrative disorder, CDD, according to a meta-analysis of 20 different studies.
Right. The CDD generally has all the features of autism, as well as some that are unique. Children with autism also regress, but they typically do so between 1 and 2 years of age. Those with CDD show a rapid loss of skills between ages 2 and 7.
But so this is so interesting to me because, I talk on a regular basis. I was places in Sacramento doing talks, and I tell about, Jem's story, and I read up all the time about true regressive autism.
Right.
Because, and I always say in my talk, when I was a young mom, I certainly knew about autism, but what I knew was that some kids just didn't progress. We heard about those kids with autism, and that was not my child, so I didn't worry about that.
That was not my child either. My child regressed.
And then I knew that there were some kids that regressed. We all saw the videos on YouTube and on the internet earlier before there was YouTube of kids that were, running around talking, doing whatever one day, and the next day they were in their high chair and it was lights on, nobody home.
Right.
And that kept me up at night. I was worried about that, but it wasn't my kid. That wasn't what we saw. My son had true regressive autism where he lost a little skill every day.
That was the same with Wyatt.
Right. And they say that well over 50% of the individuals that are diagnosed with autism now, that's the kind of autism that they have. And I think that it's a particularly insidious, look, none of them are good, right? But one of the things that happens with our form of autism is that moms are told they're crazy.
Right.
And that we have fallout for a considerable portion of our life of that because we go, something's going on, and people go, no, it's not. And at least me, and I think a lot of other parents, I was like, oh, okay, because I wanted to believe that nothing was happening.
And because people saw our children progress at a certain point and thought, well, they can't be regressing now.
But you were told, you went in and said, isn't something going on? And everybody was like, no.
Boys are late talkers.
Yes. All
that
that
was one of the
BS
things.
that we get told of, I was told, well, you're just a late in life mother who worries about everything.
Right, I was told that too.
That's true, but my kid did lose language also.
Right.
I get
right. My child was putting his head through the kitchen window, and my pediatrician said, well, that's frustration from his lack of ability to talk, which is coming from being a late bloomer.
And see, I want to go back and slap these doctors.
I know.
Is it just me? Or
No.
kick them with a pointed shoe?
No.
Let's say that. But so now, and look, I'm of two minds about this because we've known about this diagnosis in the DSM-5, the childhood disintegrative disorder, for a while, and I wondered when it was going to rear its head because we like to move the pieces on the chessboard all the time. Now, I have said for the longest time that I wish we would come up with a new name for the different types of autism.
Right.
I do. So I don't disagree with now we're going to call this some other thing. But my problem is that if you're an insurance company and you just have gotten legislation passed saying that you have to cover autism, is this the way they're going to try to skinny out of it, Nancy?
Right. Well, it has
more.
It has unique features that are different from just straight on autism, including more severe symptoms and a different symptom profile from autism, that it's accompanied by acute anxiety, aggression, hyperactivity, and often by features reminiscent of psychosis, such as muttering or gesturing to the air.
But is it me? Like, I'm sure that in the past, these things have been lumped together all together with autism. I don't care if we separate it out. I think that's better if we phenotype it. But are they now going to say that this particular thing, well, we don't know if it works with ABA.
I don't know what they're going to say.
This makes me
nervous. It doesn't say that in the article.
It doesn't, but it makes me nervous because I always wonder what's driving this.
Right.
But let's all be aware of it. There are aspects of this that I could say that, Jem's regression started before the age of 2, which is the only reason why he doesn't fit this profile. Right?
Wyatt started around between 1.5 and 2.
Yeah, Jem's did
and
too.
he fits this profile in terms of symptoms.
But I think most of our kids that have regressive autism would, is my point. And so I'm just mindful of, I don't want this to be an excuse to not give them the therapy that
Right.
helps and works and whatever.
Right.
Let's be vigilant, as they say.
Okay, the second story is about a new play, a use of a puppet in a play that there's been a whole controversy because they say that the puppet used to portray the autistic boy dehumanizes those with the condition.
So the play is All in a Row. It stars former EastEnders actress Charlie Brooks
That's
as a mother.
London, I assume.
Yes, there's a show that's called EastEnders.
Right.
It was pretty hilarious, and she plays the mother of a severely autistic son. It's set to open later this month at Southwark Playhouse. It's written by Alex Oates, and Alex is somebody who had worked part-time as a caregiver. The puppet portrays the character of Lawrence, who's described as autistic, nonverbal, and occasionally violent. Okay, so this is an interesting thing. And it's always interesting to do perspective taking. And so you have this play that has actors that are human, and the person who is on the autism spectrum is being played by a puppet.
The puppet is also played by, the puppet is somebody who is not autistic.
The puppet is as I understand it, is a character
that is autistic, severely autistic, but the person working the puppet is not autistic. That's what I meant to clarify.
And I believe, in talking to my friends that are self-advocates, that it would be, and I don't want to put words in people's mouth, but I was just talking to Alex Plank the other day, and he said, I just don't understand why there would ever be a reason to have anyone else but an autistic actor play a person with autism
yeah.
in this day and this age. I don't know that I agree with that.
Right. I don't know that I do either.
And I said to him, because if you say that, then the reverse is true. That if you can only play things, if the only people who can play things are people who already possess those things,
Right.
then what's acting,
Right.
first of all?
Right.
And second of all, then are you saying that a person who is on the autism spectrum can't play
A
somebody
non-autistic who's typical. Right.
And I think that we don't want to put that out into the world. So it's a rough thing. And then when you think about, because, I am a playwright. I've now written 2 plays that have been produced. And I like to tell stories. And, and I'm a director. And you think of, how do I tell this story? How do you tell the story of a child who is nonverbal, has autism, and is sometimes violent? Because you can't cast a child in that role. So would you cast, and you can't even cast a neurotypical child in that role. I mean, you could if it's filmed, but not on stage.
Right. Right.
That's too much to ask of a child actor, I feel. And so what do? Do you cast an adult, and do you cast an adult with autism to play a child? Isn't that? I mean, it is an interesting question.
But a lot of these autism advocates have said that it literally dehumanizes the identity you sought to represent.
And I can see that point of view. But my question to them is, how do you tell this story then?
Right.
On stage, do we say that we just don't ever tell stories of children on stage and they're always off stage? How do you tell the story? Because that also isn't good for the autism community. So I have more questions than answers, but find it fascinating. I don't disagree with them
They did consult those with autism and parents of children with autism while
what did
developing
they
the
say?
play. It didn't say what they said, but they just wanted to let us know that they consulted them.
Interesting. Very, very interesting. And then our last story, it's one that I've been wanting to cover for a while, that there is a new organization, it's a new nonprofit that's called the National Council on Severe Autism. And it just is brand new in this month, and a lot of people last week we didn't have time for in the news last week, or I would have covered this. But it's interesting, wait a week, and there's a bunch of people who are unhappy about it too, right? Because you're never going to please everybody. But a lot of people last week were just applauding that finally there's an organization to deal with, because when it's severe autism, those families don't get the coverage of what their plight is like the rest of us do. And I'm talking about the severest of the severe cases.
Right,
And
and it's struck a chord, obviously. It says some 1,500 people have signed up for the newsletter.
Yeah.
Dozens of caregivers have sent emails seeking help, and more than 2,000 people follow the group's Facebook page. And it features posts about the need for supporting housing and hospital care, the dearth of clinical research on severe autism, and the personal accounts of raising severely autistic children.
yeah. But there's some controversy now surrounding it, and not surprisingly, some of it is coming from the Thinking Person's Guide to Autism. We've had Shannon DeRoche Rosa on the show before, and I enjoy hearing her opinion always. It is not often the same as my opinion, but you know, that's the world, folks. That is the world. But she is saying that the people who are doing the board are parents and guardians, and she is saying that these are not the people who should be in charge of this conversation.
That it should be the actual autistic people themselves.
But we're talking about the people who are the severest of
Right,
the severe.
so how can they?
And my question is, like, so are we saying that people who are not the severest of the severe should be running this organization? Because I don't think that that's right either. I think that perfect example, and I'm going to call Alex Plank into play again.
Okay.
Alex was on the show probably 2-3 years ago. He was co-hosting with me, and we had a fabulous mom who was on doing an interview via Skype, and she was talking about her new book. It was Liz Becker, and she was talking about her new book, The World According to Matt, which were blogs that she had written about her son, Matt. And she was talking about how exciting it was because Matt had just been able to move to his own apartment. And this is something that it took her 20 years to work on. Matt is nonverbal and needs daily support, but he wanted to live on his own. And so she helped him. It took her 20 years to teach him the skills. And he's in a facility where he can pull a string and somebody can come and help him. But 20 years that she had put in. And Alex said to her, Alex, who is on the spectrum, but on an entirely different part of the spectrum than where Matt is, right? Very. And Alex was just coming off of being a consultant on the bridge. He's very capable. Alex is more capable than I am.
Right.
Let's just
I hear
say
what you're
that,
saying.
right? And so at one point Alex said to her, and he said, so where does he work? Because that's a question from Alex's world.
Right.
And she said, honey, he doesn't work. He can't work. And he said, what are you talking about? And she said, it took us 20 years to get him to be able to be in his own apartment. Like, we could have devoted those 20 years to getting him up to speed on a job skill where he could have done some, you know,
menial, probably
paper sorting
easy
kind of a thing, but we didn't. We chose to spend 20 years on the life skills for him to live on his own. And Alex was like, but, and I understood Alex's point of view, but none of us can completely understand where Liz was coming from because we haven't walked in those shoes.
Right.
Even, and most especially, Alex. So putting high-functioning adults who are capable of running a business in and a nonprofit, you can speak to how much it takes to run a nonprofit. You know, I know in the ideal world that it would be people who are on the autism spectrum, but if they're not capable, then we don't do the nonprofit? Well, we tried that for how many years? So that's where I am on this. Where are you on this?
I feel the same way. I mean, we can't criticize that they don't have enough of those on the autism spectrum that have severe autism involved if they're not capable of being involved in it.
Well, I think capable of being involved, and I hope that they do involve, but running a nonprofit, you know, for some people, running a nonprofit, for me, running a nonprofit would be way too stressful.
It is very stressful, I can tell you that.
Right. That is not necessarily a kind thing to fob onto somebody and say, and now you have to do this. Playing a role on it, being asked your opinion on it, different.
Right.
Different. But
Agreed.
running it, I don't know how you do it. but appreciate the fact that I am very much about the phrase "nothing about us without us," and every year my understanding of that changes and morphs, and I understand a little bit more. Because as a parent, when I had a child who was nonverbal, I believed that I was his proxy. So I believed that my voice for him was strong. And boy, that's a controversial thing. And Shannon and I don't agree on that, right?
Right.
And there's many other people that we don't agree on because that say that's offensive. But I felt that way as a parent.
Right.
That he got a voice. And if he didn't have one, I was going to be there for his voice as his proxy. I am no longer his proxy. I have a different role now, and my role is
I feel like I'm
often-
still Wyatt's proxy to a degree.
And I appreciate that. And I would not disagree with you on that. But I understand that my role now is often to support and then sometimes to sit down and shut up.
Right.
But I would never say that to a parent who is still the proxy.
Well, they're saying there's no single solution for a population this diverse, so
Of course not.
that's
course not.
probably what we can take away from
That's what we can take away from it.
it. Okay,
but anyway,
so should we take a break and
we
then come back with our
should.
first guest?
Yes, we should. Chris Hall is going to be joining us. So stick around, you guys. We'll be right back.
Okay.
Hi, I'm Shannon Penrod, and we're at the ABCs and XYZs of Special Needs Conference. And this year, for the first time, they've got something really remarkable. It's the Entrepreneurial Boutique. These are all items that have been made and are being sold by individuals who have special needs. So we're going to do a little shopping and talk to some of these fabulous entrepreneurs. Come on.
My name is Molly Rarick, and I'm founder of Breed's Gift. We're a nonprofit that serves teens and adults with special needs, like Chase here. We were founded in 2013 and serve people in the Conejo Valley, Santa Barbara, and LA.
Our main objective is to give our participants the skills they need to gain a more independent life.
My name is Shelley Cox, and Lisa Zalagi and I are founders of Creative Steps and Create Micro Business Enterprises. And the items that we're selling here today are all made by the clients who have passions about what they want to make, and then they get the profits from what they make after we've paid all of the other expenses.
We are here today because my goal is to be independent, and also I would like to share all my artwork, and I would like to sell.
Thinking about at his young age being a businessman, it's amazing. I cannot be more proud.
Hi, I'm Lisa Ackerman. Welcome back to Talk of Facts. We hear questions all the time, and we want to give you the answers that help make your journey in autism easier and more navigatable. Less than a year ago, we interviewed the top 100 doctors in the United States working with children on the spectrum, and we asked them a question in the cloak of secrecy. What are the top 3 mistakes parents living with autism do? Number 1, and the one that makes me laugh the most, is when they use their physician as a marriage and family therapist. 1, the doctors told me it made them uncomfortable, and 2, they were highly unqualified to provide that type of advice. So the night before your physician appointment with your MAPS doctor, get together with your spouse, significant other, and write out the list of the targets in the agenda that you want to cover at the physician's appointment. Get in sync. Then you'll be definitely spending less time and not making that doctor so uncomfortable. Second thing that was the most common mistakes parents living with autism make is they want to go too fast. And really, you want to pace yourself in the autism journey. We all know that we want to get our kid to be the best they can be and hopefully recover from autism. And what a lot of the doctors have told me is that you want to really pace yourself. 1, to let the labs be your guide, and 2, work with your physician on the prioritization and the delivery of the different medical interventions. The third most common mistake they felt families made was giving up too soon. And what you need to know is they're invested. They're looking at wanting to get the best from your child. But I tell you that when I got that and consolidated the 100 interviews with these physicians, most of the doctors who brought that up had tears in their eyes. They want you to know that they're in the fight with you, and they want you to know that hope is really real. It may take hard work and it may take time, but to not give up and to stay in the game. So let TACA help you. We'll have some more TACA facts for you in the future, real questions and real answers for the autism journey.
And we're back, and right now we're joined via Skype by Chris Hall. Chris is a 25-year-old autistic entrepreneur, as he calls himself, who one day decided to form an organization known as Computers for the Autistic Foundation, and that was when he wasn't doing his work from home PC repair, which now helps educate and helps others through donating the power of a computer to benefit them as they become young adults at no cost to them. Welcome to the show, Chris.
Hello, everybody. What's going on? My name is Chris. I am an autistic entrepreneur who does an organization known as Computers for the Autistic Foundation.
How did you start that, Chris?
How I started it was I was fixing computers for people just out of random, and I realized at the time that I wasn't making enough to do anything at all. So I decided one day that I would decide to help kids who were autistic to be able to build computers to donate for education purposes and for social skill purposes and stuff like that. So
It's very cool. And I understand that your business is, it's important to you to be eco-friendly. Talk to us a little bit about that.
So I'm one of the only organizations that uses what's called a velomobile, which is called a bike car, as a mode of transportation over the known automobile and everything else like that. We also use trikes as a mode of transportation. We have done probably over 5,000 miles in the last 3 or 4 years alone, transporting computers to children all across the South Shore of Boston and Massachusetts.
And how many miles an hour can you go on that thing? It's cool.
With the ELF, I can go up to 30 miles an hour. With a normal trike, about 20 miles an hour. It depends on where I am in the Boston area that I can go through. So.
But Boston gets some serious snow. Doesn't that slow you down a little bit? Aren't you freezing?
No, not really, because a lot of the time it's just a workout for me. So I'm usually sweating like crazy when it comes to riding a bike overall. That, and then when it's snowing out or anything else like that, if it's really snowing really bad, we do not operate. So.
Wow.
Tell us what autism means to you and to those you help.
Autism to me means, you are unique. Autism means, don't let anybody get in the way of your happiness being who you are. Look up every day to know that you are who you are. Don't let anybody bring you down.
That's amazing.
Okay.
And you started this business and you've been promoting this business. How do you make your business stand out in a sea of companies to be able to get the attention you need to be able to help the folks you're helping?
Well, we mostly do our stuff on Facebook. We do a lot of our stuff just in the community ourselves. We work with other organizations such as Access, Autism Sprinter, everybody else who works in the autistic community. We work alongside them as well. We also do disability advocacy as well for kids who need it. So, we are really looking at the opportunities to help kids in need to be able to help them along the way. We also work with many other companies as well. So we're pretty much out there. We don't get a lot of donations outward, but we do get our word out to other people. So
how can people support you then?
Well, in the state of Massachusetts, Massachusetts, we do accept donations of old computers that can help children in need. We also have fundraisers as well to keep us up and going. We have 2 GoFundMes. We have one for computer parts and, just stuff that we need to fix computers. And then we have one for the trikes that helps us rebuild them, keep them on the road, that kind of thing. So.
And do you take all computers? You just take PCs or you take Macs? How do we donate a computer?
How you donate a computer is we work with a few of our local shops in our area, and they are our official drop-off locations. We take any computer that has a dual-core computer like processor in it. We don't take anything that's older than 2006 just because of what we install on it. We take a Chromium OS, like a Chromebook, and we install that for computers that are donated.
Okay, because that was going to be my next question. I've got a couple of old computers, but I think they're too old.
Yeah, I think mine are too old too.
At a certain point, you can't do anything.
Right.
Now, for those of us who are computer illiterate, Chris, how would we know if we have a dual-core processor? Would it say it somewhere in the computer?
Yes, it would say it. Usually a lot of computers have stickers on them that would say, like, Intel Core 2 Duo, AMD, all that stuff works out too. We also take old tablets. They have the factory reset, but we do take tablets to help kids with their assistive technology tools. So.
And how many kids would you say you've helped through this program?
In the past 7 years or so, I think I've helped 30.
Okay, great.
But it's life-changing.
Yes,
when somebody
it is.
gives you a computer, I bet you've got some amazing stories of what these young people were able to do with these donated computers.
Well, we're not just helping children, too. I'm actually starting to help people who are on elderly homes and group homes as well, because we work with, again, I work with disability advocacy people, and a lot of them end up living in elderly homes, housing sections, and all that stuff, too. So, I'm trying a trial where we donate one computer for everybody to use, and if nothing goes wrong with the computer, and within a long period of time, I'm going to consider helping those who struggle to have internet access where they live. So.
And you also, when in your spare time, you have a model train club. Is that correct?
Yep, that's right. I'm going to be a part of the Bay State Model Railroad Museum in Rosendale, Mass. So.
That's cool.
Great.
So if people want to donate a computer, how do they do it?
Again, we work with our local computer shops for donations. I'm not super sure about how the process would go if somebody lived far away. It's just the costs for shipping computers can be very expensive, especially in bulk.
Okay.
The difficult part is the hazmat fees for batteries. They can get very expensive because if something was to happen during shipments and stuff. We're 100% sure that's why donations, when we do donations, they're local. So, we want to donate out of state, but it's just kind of difficult at this time. So.
And how does one sign up for a donated PC?
So how you would get a donated computer, if you live within our mile range, you'd go visit our website and download our sign-up form that we have, and you fill it out, and you mail it in to us by the Postal Service with a copy of your child's IEP or their doctor's diagnosis for proof.
And what is your website, Chris?
It's kind of odd to say, I usually don't just say it. I usually just type it out, but it's the PC Pitstop 001.wix.com/CFTAF.
That's a mouthful.
It is a mouthful.
It is. That's why I just redirect everybody over to our Facebook page.
Okay.
So Facebook
We
page.
have Instagram too.
And what's the Facebook page?
Yeah, what's your Facebook page?
Yeah, the Facebook page is Computers for the Autistic Foundation.
Okay, good. That's
makes
easier.
sense.
All right,
Thank
well,
you
you're doing
so
great
much.
work. We
Yes.
appreciate you coming on the show today to talk about it.
Oh, no problem. I appreciate your time too, and I really hope that people will consider visiting us and helping us with our cause. So I really appreciate
Great
it.
cause.
Thank
All right,
you
thank
so
you,
much, Chris.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
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 Okay,
I love
so,
it when
yeah.
people are, I love the
Entrepreneurial,
entrepreneurial spirit,
yes,
and
entrepreneurial
when
spirit.
they see a problem, find a solution. What a great, great thing.
So we're going to
Kudos
take a
to-
break, and when we come back, we're going to be with Dr. Mary Barbera.
And thrilled to have her on the show, so
Yeah.
stick with us. Parent to parent, you might be asking yourself, why does my child stim? Well, first of all, let's talk about what stimming is. Stimming is a slang term for self-stimulatory behavior, which is kind of a misnomer anyway, because a lot of the times when our children engage in these kinds of behaviors, they're not to stimulate themselves. Sometimes they're to soothe themselves. So first of all, we want to get rid of the notion that it's to stimulate themselves. But they do these behaviors because there's something about it that feels good. And that's the main thing that we need to know as parents. It's not some random behavior. There's something about it that's giving the child a paycheck. And once we get an idea of what that might be, we need to find a behavior that can take that behavior's place and start to reinforce that. We want to pick something that's more socially acceptable. So if, for instance, the child is doing a lot of hand flapping because they like seeing their blurred fingers, then we can find something else for them to focus on, maybe a toy that does blurred colors, so for a period of time they'll focus on that. The main thing to remember, though, is that there is a reason for these behaviors. There's something about it that feels good to the child. And once we know that, we can begin to change it. There's a phrase that's being used in the autism community called stimming.
You say howdy, we say hi. Let's get rowdy, let's get wild. Let's get wild. Let's get wild. Let's get wild. Let's get wild.
Hi, welcome back to Autism Live. I'm Lisa Ackerman. We're here doing allergy-free cooking, and I brought my sister with me today.
Jamie Davis, thanks for having me.
A lot of people are asking about a allergy-free breakfast, and breakfast can be full of crap. You know,
But it's full of crap
cereal.
and it's hard to do. We don't have time in the morning. We're in a hurry.
We're going completely nut-free. The recipe is not
Personality, we can't do anything about.
can't do anything about that. So we're going to start off first with, I'm using sorghum and brown rice flour. I find the texture good, and I've added some flaxseed meal. We talked about that last time, flaxseed meal for poop. Almost every one of our kids has a poop issue. What's next on the recipe is the quinoa flakes, baking powder, cinnamon, and the xanthan gum. It brings the glutinous texture back into the flour, and often what happens with these recipes is they can fall apart. This one holds up nicely. I like it. For the folks that are egg-free, we have a ton of egg replacers. One of those can be the arrowroot starch or bringing back some additional flax seeds. So there's a lot of options to go eggless, but we're going to go egg full in this one. For sweetener, I use the maple syrup. I stay away from refined sugar. What I'm adding now is the coconut milk, maple syrup, and a little bit of the coconut oil. And we're going to add in the raisins, craisins, and chocolate chips at the end. I find that chocolate chips can coax people to eat some really amazing things. When we started, Jeff had 42 food allergies, so we had to get creative in how we cooked. So nuts were a big, big issue. What I like now is that he can tolerate so many more things after start doing this diet. So let me show you how you can deal with this sticky stuff here. You get your fingers really wet, and you can push it down. So my oven has been preheated. It's at 350 degrees. So we're gonna just throw this in. Like I said, I like it around 23 minutes, and the magic oven says, I'm done. Looks like, don't you love magic ovens? They're awesome. There we go, pops right out. The texture of these, and it's so pretty. It looks almost like a big chocolate chip cookie, but you actually made it healthy. But you can be my guinea pig. Tell me what you think.
It looks really good.
Doesn't it? So the textures and the colors in there are just beautiful. So the raisins are for you, the chocolate chips are for your kid.
I can't believe it's gluten-free.
I know, right? It doesn't taste like, crap. We're wrapping up another cooking show. If you have feedback, you can email us at autismlive@gmail.com. We're, of course, on Facebook. You could go to facebook.com/autismlive. And, of course, Talkin' Now has thousands of recipes. Join me there, and we can cook some more later on. So thanks for joining us.
You say howdy, we say hi. Let's get rowdy, let's get wild. Let's get wild.
And we're back. And now, as promised, we have Dr. Mary Barbera with us. Mary fell into the autism world in the late 1990s when her firstborn son, Lucas, was diagnosed with autism one day before his 3rd birthday. Now, Mary has been transformed over the last 2 decades from an overwhelmed and confused parent, in her own words, to a board-certified behavior analyst and best-selling author. Her book, The Verbal Behavior Approach, How to Teach Children with Autism and Related Disorders, has sold more than 50,000 copies. And she also fell into the world of online marketing, launching her first online course in early 2015. And since then, she has created 3 online courses and a monthly membership program. She's on a mission to turn autism around for 2 million by 2020. And so, welcome to the show, Mary. Quite a list of accomplishments.
Thank you for having me. It's really great to meet you, Shannon and Nancy. Happy to be here.
It's our pleasure. We're thrilled to have you. You've got a new podcast that just started last month. Tell us a little bit about Turn Autism Around.
Yeah, so I've been in the online space for a few years, and I listen to a lot of podcasts, mostly about online marketing, but there's a few behavior analyst podcasts that I listen to, and I just decided in December, you know what, I'm on a big mission to turn autism around for 2 million by 2020, and I have to reach more people. So I decided that I was going to start a podcast. It's mostly for parents and professionals. They don't have to be behavioral professionals or even educational professionals. I'm also a registered nurse. I'm married to a physician, so I have interest in training medical professionals, educational professionals, social workers, whoever wants to learn about autism. I'm providing this podcast weekly. It comes out every Tuesday, and you can subscribe on iTunes. It's called Turn Autism Around. So far, the feedback has been great. 5-star reviews and lots of people helping me spread the word.
And what do you mean by turn autism around in 2 million by 2020?
Right. So even the name Turn Autism Around, I know there's a lot of people that, for my son, I have a son who's 22. His name is Lucas, and he continues with moderate to severe autism. He remains pretty impaired. He needs supervision. And so for him, turning autism around means that I'm continuing to provide him safe environments, people that understand his needs, programs that help him increase his communication so he can be happier. So for Lucas and for older kids with pretty significant delays, turning autism around looks different than a very young child with new diagnosis of autism. I've worked with many young children who started out as looking really impaired, and with proper intensive behavioral treatment, they've gone on and to be included in general education environments. A few of them have lost their diagnosis, or a few of them that I know are going to college or learning to drive. So turning autism around really just means making things better, having each child reach his or her fullest potential, be as safe, as independent, and as happy as possible. And that's what I mean about turning autism around. So it doesn't have to be a complete turnaround. And in most cases, it's not a complete turnaround, but it's just making everyone's lives better. And it's not just focusing on the kids and their deficits and programming. It's also focusing, I want the podcast to be helping parents and professionals also feel good, feel happy, lead happier lives, be less stressed. And so some of the episodes are going to be on self-care and how do we make sure that we don't get depressed. If we get depressed, how do we have realistic but hopeful goals for our kids, for ourselves, and so that is also a big focus that I want to take with this podcast.
And tell us a little bit about, so it comes out weekly, but each week do you have a different topic? Do you have guests? Tell us a little bit about the format of the show.
Right. So each week we do one episode. And so the first episode number 1, is my journey. And also as a parent first, then how I got into being a behavior analyst. Then I became an author. Then I became an online marketer. So my journey and 15 lessons that I've learned over the past 2 decades. So that's episode number 1. I would start there for sure because, a lot of what I say and even how I interview people is all based on my unique background with all of these different hats that I wear in the autism world. And then other episodes include some interviews. My first interview was episode number 3, where I interview Kelsey, who's a single mom of 2 boys on the spectrum. She found my online course a couple of years ago and really turned autism around for her older son, who was only 2.5 when she found my course. But he was banging his head up to 100 times a day. She had to take him out on a leash and a harness. And now, over the past 2 years, first through just my online courses, and then she was able to get providers in there to help her. She's able to turn his world around and turn her own life around. And then her younger son was diagnosed, and so she knew right away how to teach him language, how to advocate for him. So while Kelsey and her boys are still, deeply in the autism world, she's managed to turn her life around. I also have some interviews with some professionals, like Dr. Megan Miller is on next week's podcast episode. I'm interviewing Amanda Kelly, who is Behavior Babe. I don't know if you have ever heard of her.
Yes, she's been on the show.
Oh,
Yes.
She's been a guest?
Yes.
Okay, great. So she's a friend of mine, so I interviewed her for an upcoming episode. So I am going to have a mixture of solo shows. I just recorded a show, a podcast episode on keeping kids with autism safe, which is a huge, huge issue. So it'll be a variety of topics and a mixture between solo shows and interviews.
Wonderful. You have such a unique perspective.
Definitely, coming as a parent and as a BCBA. Tell us how they can find the podcast.
So my website has all my information about my free resources, weekly video blogs, my podcast. So marybarbera.com is where you can find all the information about my free resources as well as my paid courses. And you can also search your podcast app on iTunes for Turn Autism Around. I would love it if you subscribe to the podcast. That helps with the algorithm. I'm learning all this stuff about doing podcasts, but if you like what you hear, give me a 5-star rating and review. That also helps to have iTunes really feature it, recommend it. I've also been doing weekly video blogs, which is on my website as well as on my YouTube channel. And I've been doing that for 2 years. So whenever you have a topic, like if you are on this listening or watching and you think, well, I wonder what Mary has to say about stimming or scripting, just Google Mary Barbera stimming, Mary Barbera sleep, Mary Barbera whatever. Chances are good that I've done a video on it, and you can get to it right away.
Okay.
And you can hear that little snippet, and hearing that little snippet of something you're struggling with might really help you take action and start to see how you can begin to make strides in turning things around for you and your family or your clients.
Right. Very good.
Dr. Barbera, since we have you, I'd love to get your perspective as a mom. and you were talking about how you have people that you have helped and that they've gotten there early and they've gotten everything that they needed and they've progressed, sometimes to the point where they lose their diagnoses. And yet that was not the story for you. And so often I see that one of the many tears in the fabric of the autism community is this, the tale of two cities that people arrive in with autism. And you see that intimately on a daily basis. Maybe if you could share some of your wisdom about how is that for you as a mom and as a practitioner, and what do you see and what helps you?
I think when parents have very young children with just showing signs of autism, I think it's really important to offer them hope that that recovery is possible. Now, some of the older studies, like the original Lovaas study, show 47%. Some of the more recent studies show 4% of kids actually recover from autism. I also know kids that are largely recovered, but they still have some issues. So it's not black and white, recovery, not recovery. And the other thing I learned over the years is if you are proactively treating children with behavioral therapy as well as other therapies that might work, you may not end up with a child that is independent or recovered, like my son Lucas, who still requires a lot. But it's never a waste of time to teach kids to get to the next level, whatever that next level is. Like I had one of the parents who's taken my online course. She said, she wrote in, she had a couple of kids on the spectrum, a young son who was making all kind of gains, but then she had an 11 or 12-year-old, and she wrote in, she's like, my 11-year-old just had his first bowel movement on the toilet in 11 years. To him, that is a major milestone. And so we have to celebrate whatever the next step is. We have to strive. We just can't go like, oh, they're low functioning, just push them aside. They're a child or a young adult or whatever. They have their strengths and their needs. They're not high functioning or low functioning. I did a podcast episode all about high functioning and low functioning, and how I used to think of it as a black and white issue. It's very gray. And even with my typically developing son who's in college, he's third year of college, his name is Spencer. I want the same things for Spencer that I do for Lucas. I want both of my boys, every child that I know with and without autism, to be as safe as possible, as independent as possible, and as happy as possible. And so I think sometimes when people hear behavioral therapy or ABA, they get like, oh, I don't want to force my child. I am all about getting everybody as positive and as happy as possible, because we only have one life to live and we have to make the most of it.
Right.
Amen
Very
to that.
good.
And we only briefly addressed your book, but I see that it's up on the shelf behind you. The Verbal Behavior Approach, How to Teach Children with Autism and Related Disorders. Where can people get that?
That's available at Amazon. We published this book. It's with Jessica Kingsley Publishers, published in 2007, so it is 12 years old, which I can't even believe it. I wrote it from my perspective as a parent as well as a behavior analyst, and it has sold more than 50,000 copies. It's in 10 languages. I had no idea it was going to be this popular. Get it on Amazon. You can search for it on my website. I have some more information about it. It is really unique because throughout the book, in the first and last chapter, are more my perspective, how I was in denial and how I coped, and then at the end are kind of all my soapboxes, all my lessons learned. But then all throughout the middle is more of a step-by-step, like break a cookie into 10 pieces and get the child to request cookie over and over again. There's even a chapter on potty training, which I tend to have some expertise in. But, I had no idea that it was going to be so popular. But what really thrills me is that people without any background, lay people, can read this book on a plane. It's an easy read for lay people who have no knowledge of autism. And it's also used in graduate level ABA text, as a text, as a required text, and in some undergrad programs as well. So I think it really does a nice job of bridging the gap between people that have no knowledge and then people who have a lot of knowledge but don't know really how to break things down so that people can understand what the important parts of ABA are.
Well, you've given so many resources to the community. So again, we want to have you say your website again, and we'll put it up on the screen. But for people who are listening instead of watching, Traven, can you put it back up there? And Mary, say it again, please.
So marybarbera.com. If you can't remember how to spell my last name, just try your best. Or you can even just search Mary Autism, and I will come right up as the first option. But there's a ton of free resources. Check out all my video blogs and check out my website, marybarbera.com.
Thank you
so much for joining us. All your great resources.
Absolutely.
Oh, it's great. It's great what you're doing to get the word out about a variety of subjects in the autism world. I'd be happy to come back again in the future.
Thank you, Mary.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Take care.
So you want to take a quick break and then come back and talk about tomorrow's show,
yes,
what you've got going on. Okay, great.
Bye-bye. Nope, we're still here.
Oh, we're still here.
Are we not going anywhere? I don't have him in my ear. Is he saying no break? All right, we're staying. All right, we're staying.
Hi, Lisa Ackerman back with your Talk of Facts, the autism journey questions and answers that you need to help your child make the progress they need. I'm here to talk to you about one really important item. A lot of people ask me the question, well, Lisa, I want to see this specialist in another state. How do I do that? I don't own a jet. I don't have the ability to fly without great pain and travel. Not a problem. We know how to get this done. So I actually encourage families, even though in travel can be a tremendous hardship getting a child with autism through security, through the plane, and in the journey to where they need to go. We have a whole white paper on TACA about how to travel with special needs kids. So it can be done. So travel, we know that can be expensive. Not everyone has an unlimited supply of cash for air flights. We love and work with this group called miracleflights.org. They're fantastic. They will fly you and your child, so one parent, one adult, anywhere in the United States, one time a year. Also in the TACA document are places to stay. So often you will have people in your life that love and support your family and don't know exactly how to help. Ask them to gift you their travel or their rewards cards or coupons for hotel, rental car. That's a great way to be able to get maybe a hotel room that has a refrigerator or a microwave and that's close to a Whole Foods, so you don't have that added cost of going out to dinner, especially if your kid has a lot of allergies. It's important to note that there's not a pediatrician or a specialist by every Starbucks in the United States. Close does not always equal best. So I bring up the travel point so you know that travel is possible, number one, and often it's really going to help you get down the road faster for your kid and getting the answers you need from the specialist that knows what to do. So don't be afraid to travel.
We were just talking about Valentine's Day, and that's tomorrow.
Yes, and we both were trying to wear a little pink,
pink, yeah.
Going on, and we hope that you all have a wonderful Valentine's Day.
And your kiddos as well.
I was just saying that, Jim and I, we're not good at Valentine's Day and our anniversary because every year something would be going on, and it was usually something with Jem, and that took our focus, and we said, well, we'll do something next week or whatever. And that isn't the case anymore, but we're out of the habit of it, so I have to get that together. I got to get on
Just
that.
one more thing you've got to get together.
Well, but that's a good thing. And do you have plans for Valentine's Day?
No plans for Valentine's Day.
But you may have a Valentine now?
I don't know.
Maybe. Maybe. She's not saying. Her lips are sealed. Okay.
Maybe.
So tomorrow, though, on the show, we expect to have Bonnie Yates on the show. I'm waiting for confirmation on that. But we do have, this is very interesting, we have Dr. Andrea is going to be on, and she is coming to us from Restoration Chiropractic. So she is a pediatric restorative chiropractor who helps align children's spines, because a lot of times we've had chiropractors before on the show, and there are different types of chiropractic that sometimes have been shown to be very helpful to our kids on the spectrum.
Yeah, I've heard about this.
Yes.
With kids.
Years ago, after I had people who were at the Generation One, what am I trying to say?
Generation Rescue, Generation One.
When they have their conference. Conference is the word that I couldn't come up with. I had women who would go and be my person on the ground for the radio show. And there was one mom that did that for me, and she came back and she said, you know, the most amazing thing I saw was a presentation from a chiropractor, and we had him on the show, and he practiced a kind of chiropractic that was called Nuka chiropractic, and talked about how there is a pivot place where your spine and your brain, not your brain, but your skull meet. And then if that gets crimped up at all, you don't get as good a blood flow. You're fine, you're not having a stroke, but you are not as productive. And that all kinds of people on the spectrum and off the spectrum, when you get that realigned, that they watch like your cheeks flush and you just feel better, are able to focus better. It's years later, and I'm like, I want to get that done.
It sounds like an
I'd like
interesting
for
modality.
me, I'd like to make sure that there's enough blood getting to my brain, because I think I'm mildly convinced that there isn't. Something's not getting to the top.
So tomorrow you'll have this chiropractor on that you can learn about that.
And she came very highly recommended to us, so I'm excited to talk to her. Plus, we'll do our mindfulness moment tomorrow. And I'm fresh back from San Francisco, going to a conference where I saw a presenter. I'm going to be talking about it all year long, talking about mindfulness having to do with autism parents, and how it is, and with individuals on the spectrum, and how there are hundreds of studies now who show that helps supercharge ABA. Like, you want to get more from your ABA, you do mindfulness. And so I'm sorry, I'm
So
going to
you
sing
do
that
mindfulness
song.
before the ABA? Like
You're doing mindfulness on a regular basis every single day. But you know, we were told before we started ABA in our generation, you have to get the child healthy first. That in order for ABA to work, your child has to be healthy, because if the child is like, you know, doubled over with their fists in their guts, how much you can still get something done, but you're not going to get as much done. So you want to supercharge your ABA, you get your child healthy first. Now they're saying do that, but start practicing mindfulness for the parent. They found that parents, and I'm a part of that study, parents are more effective when we've done mindfulness, and that the individuals themselves, because anxiety is such a big part of this.
It is. It's so interwoven into autism.
And it's anxiety for the parents, it's anxiety for the kiddos who then become teens who have anxiety, and adults who have anxiety, and mindfulness helps to address that. And in particular, a type of mindfulness that's known as ACT. So it's ACT, Acceptance Commitment Therapy. So Google it. We'll continue talking about that tomorrow.
Good. Sounds like an exciting show.
Yeah, we'll have a good time. Sorry you won't be here.
Yeah, me too.
You're off doing things to make money for
Act Today.
grants for
Autism Care Today, our new
Yes.
name. I gotta
Exactly.
stop saying Act Today.
We all do, but we're working on it.
Right.
In any case, thank you for being with us, Nancy, and for doing all the things that you do. We actually have like 2 minutes according to my clock. And I would love it if you would just tell people, because you have a run coming up.
We do. That's is it April 6th? I hope I'm.
Oh my gosh, that's really soon.
Right. It's in San Diego, and it's for military children with autism.
Yes.
This is like we've done this run for a number of years. And it's a special fund for military children because they're particularly hard hit, because they have to relocate so many times and oftentimes have a parent deployed. So we look at their specific needs. And this is a 10K, 5K, fun run, Easter bunny, Easter egg hunt.
Love it.
I'm afraid I didn't get the date right, though.
I'm hoping you didn't get the
it's
date
not
right,
April 6th.
because if it's April 6th,
no,
I
it's
can't
not.
be there.
It's not.
Okay, so we'll find what the date is.
We have to
but
find
it's
out
in
what the
April.
date is. It's
But
in
that's
April.
really
it's
early in April.
during Easter break, so it couldn't be April 6th.
Okay. Well, I'm happy to
Unfortunately-
hear that because I can't come on April 6th.
Okay.
April 6th is, I already committed to, it's the Fullerton Cares Mardi Gras for
Okay.
autism. So I want to come to your run. I don't want to
Okay.
be, so
I'll
let's
have to,
check
unfortunately,
the
my
dates.
brain is muddled right
I
now, and I
tell
don't
you,
have the.
I think here in LA where we've had just rain,
And we have rain again today.
And
It's
I
like
love
living
rain.
in Seattle.
But I said that this morning too. I was like, do we live in Seattle now?
Right, it's totally
What's up?
different.
Like, we don't know what to do with it, you guys.
No.
We haven't had sunshine in way too long.
Right.
We're going to need those lights that everybody needs all around the world. We don't normally have to do that here in LA. But in any case, we'll find out when the run is, but you guys can be virtual runners.
Yes, you can.
You
can
don't have to
support
come
it.
to
Go
San Diego.
Go to Act Today's website at act-today.org, and it'll give you all the information on the run so you can participate or be a virtual runner.
And if you can be there, it's a beautiful, you can run, you can walk, you can do whatever. It's a wonderful opportunity
It's at
to be with your family.
Tekaloti Shores in San Diego, which is
It's
just beautiful.
Stunning.
Right across from SeaWorld.
Exactly. And fun people there. It's a really fun day. Over by noon, and then you can go do something else in San Diego. I love to do that.
Yeah,
trip.
it's a fun day.
I love to stop at can I just tell on myself?
Yeah.
I love to stop at the Fermentation Farm on the way home in Costa Mesa. They make probiotic coconut yogurt that's called Zingy yogurt. And they make, it's the best thing ever. You should have Wyatt try it. Jen says, are we going to that yogurt place again? It's a wonderful. And then they sell things like sauerkraut and fermented beans. And, you guys, it's good. And they have classes. It's my hope and dream to take a class someday.
Learn how to ferment.
I want to.
So good for us.
I have the jars and everything. I just haven't done it. Well, we should do a whole segment on that.
Okay,
All
we'll
right.
do that.
All right. I'm waking up now. And now we're done.
Okay.
In any case, thank you guys so much for being here with us always on the show. We're going to be back tomorrow. Until then, give your kiddos a hug from me.
And give yourselves a hug from me. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye for now.